right now, your brain contains this massive, highly organized database.
Oh, absolutely.
And I mean, if you've been studying English for a while now, you probably have, maybe somewhere around 10,000 words filed away in there.
Yeah, at least 10,000, yeah.
Right. And you know the complex grammar rules. You know your present perfect from your past continuous.
The blueprints, essentially.
Exactly, the blueprints. You can easily sit down in a quiet room, take a written exam, and just completely ace it because you've done the prep work.
Right.
But then you step out into the real world, you walk into a coffee shop in London or, a boardroom in New York, and someone simply asks you, "What can I get started for you?" Or, "What are your thoughts on this?"
And that's the moment.
That is the moment. In a fraction of a microsecond, your brain it actively deletes all 10,000 words. The database completely locks down.
It really does.
You just freeze. Your heart rate spikes, your palms get sweaty, and you are left staring blankly, feeling just entirely helpless. And so the question for you listening today is, why does the human brain actively sabotage us at the exact moment we need it the most?
It is the ultimate betrayal of our own neurology, isn't it?
Yeah.
I mean, we experience it as a complete system failure.
Yeah.
And I think what makes it so devastating is the delta between what we know we are capable of in private.
Right, the written exams.
Exactly, the private competence, and what we are suddenly totally incapable of in public.
Yeah.
The cognitive load just spikes, the working memory crashes, and the language centers of the brain essentially just go dark.
Which is such a specific, visceral kind of paralysis, and usually when we talk about this kind of freezing up, we're talking about massive, high-stakes events.
It's all public speaking.
Yeah, getting up on a stage in front of 1,000 people to give a keynote address, or sitting down for this life-altering university entrance exam. But today, for you listening, we are zeroing in on a much more insidious everyday barrier.
The daily interactions.
Exactly. We are taking a deep dive into the hidden psychological and mechanical roadblocks to speaking English confidently. Because millions of people face this exact freeze up every single day, just trying to order a sandwich or say hello to a new colleague.
The frustration surrounding this is just incredibly dense. I mean, people spend years feeling like they are perpetually stuck on the runway.
Oh, that's a good way to put it.
Right. The engine is running, the fuel is in the tank, but the plane just refuses to take off.
And to help us decode how to actually get that plane off the ground, we're pulling insights today from a really compelling guide called Speak Your Way to English Confidence.
It's a fantastic resource.
It really is. And what struck me immediately about this material is that it just refuses to throw more vocabulary lists or grammar exercises at the problem.
Because that's not the issue.
Right. Instead, it starts by deeply validating the exhaustion that you, the listener, might be feeling right now. It acknowledges the sheer amount of unseen labor you've already put in. I mean, you've used the language apps until your thumbs hurt.
We all have.
You've memorized the irregular verbs. You've watched endless streams of native speakers on video. And yet, the gap between your passive understanding and your active speaking remains this massive chasm.
And that gap, that is the central paradox we really need to explore today. We operate under this very deeply ingrained societal illusion that accumulating knowledge automatically translates to performance.
Right, that knowing equals doing.
Exactly. We think that possessing the data, the vocabulary and the syntax is the exact same mechanism as the physical and real-time social act of speaking. But neurologically and psychologically, these are two entirely distinct processes.
Oh, wow.
Gathering information uses one set of neural pathways, right?
Yep.
But real-time conversational improvisation uses a totally different set.
So we've essentially been training for a swimming marathon by reading books about water.
That's exactly what we've been doing.
So the mission of our deep dive today is to fundamentally rewire how you approach the actual act of speaking. We are going to dismantle the mechanics of that freeze response.
Step by step.
Step by step. We want to shift your entire operational focus away from this crushing, paralyzing pursuit of perfection and move it squarely into the messy, functional, and highly effective reality of practice.
And that shift, it's going to require challenging some of our most closely held beliefs about what it actually means to be ready to do something.
Yep.
Because the pursuit of perfect execution is the very thing creating that bottleneck in the brain.
Let me pause you there, though, because I want to channel the very real frustration of the listener right now.
Sure.
If I've spent literally years of my life consuming English media, reading English literature, and proving my competence on paper, why is it that my mind still goes completely blank the second another human being makes eye contact and says hello?
It's so frustrating.
Right. If perfectionism is the problem, why hasn't my years of study given me the armor to just speak normally?
Well, think about how we usually approach acquiring a new skill. From a very young age, our educational systems teach us this specific sequence, right? You study, you master the material, you build confidence, and then only then you take the test.
Okay, yeah.
We internalize this timeline. We tell ourselves, I will speak when I feel ready. I will join the conversation when my vocabulary is sophisticated enough. I will speak when I am confident. We treat confidence as a biological prerequisite.
Like a permission slip.
Exactly. Like it's a permit you have to earn before you're legally allowed to open your mouth.
It's the someday fallacy. Someday I'll be perfectly fluent, and on that magical day, I will finally start talking to people.
That is exactly the problem. And our source material aggressively attacks this timeline. It argues that biologically and psychologically, confidence is a byproduct of action, not a prerequisite for it.
Wait, really? A byproduct?
Yes. You do not feel confident before you speak. Your brain only generates that feeling of confidence after you have spoken, survived the attempt, and realized you weren't, ostracized from the tribe. Confidence is the reward for taking the risk.
So we have the equation totally backward.
Completely backward.
We are waiting for an emotion that can only be unlocked by doing the literal thing we are terrified to do.
It's a vicious cycle. And it's driven by what the text identifies as the perfection trap. This is the false, crippling belief that you must sound indistinguishable from a native speaker to even have the right to participate in a conversation.
Right.
We monitor our own speech so aggressively that we create this massive traffic jam in the prefrontal cortex.
Let's dig into that traffic jam, actually. What is physically happening in the brain when we fall into this perfection trap? Because I imagine it's an incredibly energy-intensive state to be in.
Oh, it requires an astonishing amount of cognitive load. When your ultimate goal is flawless execution rather than just simple human connection, you turn into your own harshest, most demanding editor.
Yeah, the inner critic just takes over.
Precisely. Before a single word even leaves your vocal cords, your brain is desperately trying to run this multi-layered diagnostic check in a fraction of a second. It asks, is this the correct verb tense? Does this preposition make sense? Is my accent too pronounced? Is there a more sophisticated synonym I should be using?
You are essentially trying to play 3D chess while someone is just waiting for you to tell them where the bathroom is.
That is exactly the dynamic.
Yeah.
The processing power required to run that diagnostic check on every single sentence is just unsustainable.
It's too much data.
Right. The human working memory can only hold so much information at once. When you overload it with self-monitoring, the system crashes. So the freeze response isn't you forgetting the language. It is your brain shutting down because the computational bottleneck is simply too tight for any words to squeeze through.
That bottleneck visual makes so much sense, and it reminds me of the core argument in our source material, which is that communication is fundamentally about expressing ideas, not about producing flawless linguistic architecture.
Exactly.
Let me try out an analogy here. Let's say you are standing on the edge of a raging river and you need to get your cargo to the other side.
Okay, let's explore that. The cargo being your idea, your thought.
Yes, the cargo is the message you need to deliver to the person standing on the opposite bank. Now, you have two choices. You could spend 10 years sitting on your side of the river, meticulously studying engineering, drafting blueprints, and building a gleaming, structurally flawless suspension bridge out of shiny steel. A true masterpiece.
Which takes forever.
Right. Or you could just chop down a tree, throw a sturdy wooden plank across the water, and walk your cargo over today.
I love this. So the steel bridge is native level fluency, and the wooden plank is simple, functional English.
Right. And here is the kicker. The person on the other side of the river doesn't care about the bridge. They only care about the cargo.
They just want the delivery.
Exactly. They just want the delivery. If the wooden plank gets the idea from your brain into their brain, the communication is a 100% complete success. The bridge did its job.
That is a brilliant way to conceptualize it. The perfection trap convinces you that if the bridge isn't made of steel, you aren't allowed to cross. But the reality of human interaction is that we are all just trading cargo. And the source explicitly gives learners permission to use the wooden planks. Use the simple sentences. Make the small grammatical errors. Because even with those imperfections, people can still cross that bridge with you. The idea still survives the journey.
But taking that first step onto the wooden plank is terrifying. And that usually brings us to what might be the single most intimidating moment for any language learner. The absolute peak of the panic, the very first greet.
Oh, the approach, the opening of the door?
The dreaded hello.
Yeah.
Our source material emphasizes that real-life conversations rarely start with deep, complex philosophical inquiries. They start with incredibly mundane, simple interactions. Hello, how are you? I'm fine, thank you. And you?
Very basic.
But if it's so simple, why do so many learners completely lock up right at that opening exchange? They obviously know the word hello, so what's the actual trigger for the freeze?
The trigger is the sudden exposure to infinity.
Exposure to infinity, wow.
Yes. When someone walks up to you and says hello, they aren't just saying a word. They are opening a door to an unscripted, highly unpredictable human interaction. Your brain instantly skips past the greeting and panics about the infinite branching tree of possibilities of what might come after the greeting.
It's the fear of the conversational deep end.
Exactly.
You dip your toe in with a simple hi, and your amygdala immediately flashes a warning signal like, danger. What if they follow up by asking me to explain the geopolitical ramifications of global supply chains in English?
Right. Your brain goes to the worst case scenario. Because you can't predict the future of the conversation, you feel entirely out of control.
Yeah.
But the reality of daily English, which the author points out offer massive reassurance here, is that it does not require complex grammar to navigate.
It really doesn't.
The vast, overwhelming majority of daily interactions, even among highly educated native speakers, rely on short, highly efficient, simple sentences. We rarely speak in the complex paragraphs we use when we write.
Let's look at some of the concrete scenarios the text breaks down. Imagine you are meeting a new colleague at the office. You don't need to deliver a sprawling, nuanced biography of your life.
No, nobody wants that anyway.
Right. The functional, successful interaction is simply, hi, my name is Ollie, I'm from Canada. Or, if you are ordering food at a restaurant, you aren't entering a negotiation, you just say, can I have a chicken sandwich and a glass of water? Even getting to know someone and discussing hobbies. I like action movies and comedy.
Look at the architecture of those examples, though. They're stripped down to the absolute essentials.
Yes.
Subject, verb, object. They are highly efficient vehicles for moving the cargo across the river.
Okay, I am going to push back here because I can hear a very specific listener objection forming right now.
Bring it on.
So, if I am a 45-year-old professional, let's say a senior software engineer or a marketing director, I am sitting in a high-stakes corporate meeting in New York or London. I have a lifetime of expertise. If a client asks me about my weekend or my workflow and I respond with, I went to work, I came home, I like movies, won't I instantly be perceived as childish? Doesn't relying on basic subject-verb-object structures strip me of my intellectual authority?
That is a very real, very painful fear. The fear of being infantilized by your own language limitations.
Yeah, exactly.
But we have to look at how intelligence and authority are actually perceived in a communicative space. Clarity is the ultimate form of power.
Clarity's power.
Yes. Many learners operate under the delusion that they need to constantly deploy advanced SA2 level vocabulary to prove they're smart. But obscurity is not intelligence. In a high-stakes environment, your authority is conveyed through the clarity of your ideas, your decisiveness, and your ability to keep the interaction moving.
So you're saying a complex idea delivered simply is always better than a simple idea delivered with a chaotic, stumbling attempt at complex grammar?
Undoubtedly. The goal of spoken language is maintaining the rhythm of the interaction. It's like a rally in tennis.
Oh, tennis rally.
Right. When you try to construct an overly complex sentence, constantly searching for that one elusive advanced vocabulary word, you pause, you say, you stare at the ceiling, you break the rhythm, you drop the ball.
The rally dies.
Exactly. But when you use simple, clear, direct English, the conversation flows. You keep the ball in the air. You remain an active, reliable participant in the exchange, which commands far more respect than someone who stalls the meeting to find the perfect adjective.
So the directive for the listener is clear. You have to sacrifice the ego of your vocabulary size on the altar of actual functional communication. Keep the ball in the air. Keep the rhythm.
That's the priority.
But the moment we talk about keeping the rhythm and avoiding those agonizing, ceiling-staring pauses, we hit a massive structural wall. To keep the conversation moving, the listener has to dismantle what is arguably the most destructive habit in language learning.
Ah, the internal translation machine, the emulator.
Yes. Our source material identifies this as a catastrophic mechanical flaw in how most adults try to speak a new language. It's this ingrained habit of translating every single thought directly from your native language into English inside your head before you allow yourself to speak.
We need to dissect the cognitive load of this translation process because it explains exactly why conversations feel so exhausting. When you translate in your head, you are forcing your brain to do double, sometimes triple the mental work required for normal communication.
Let's map out that process. Walk us through the actual millisecond by millisecond sequence of what happens when a learner uses this internal translation machine.
Okay, let's track the data. Step 1. You formulate a thought or a response, but you formulate it in your native language. That requires neural activation. Step 2. You take that native vocabulary and you route it through your internal mental dictionary to find the English equivalents.
Right.
Step 3. You realize the English words don't follow the same grammatical order as your native language, so you had to mentally shuffle the words around, checking them against the grammar rules you memorized.
The grammar check.
And finally, step 4. Once the sentence is fully built and inspected in your head, you send the motor signal to your mouth to actually speak it aloud.
I mean, hearing you lay out those 4 steps makes me feel exhausted just thinking about it. Let's build on the computer analogy we used earlier. It is exactly like trying to run native Mac software on a Windows computer using an emulator program.
That is a perfect comparison. Elaborate on the mechanics of that.
Well, if you have a Windows PC and you want to run a program built for a Mac, you can't just open it. You have to install an emulator, a piece of software that translates the Mac code into Windows code in real time. But the emulator takes up like 90% of your computer's RAM just to function. The fan starts spinning loudly, the computer gets blazing hot, and everything moves at a glacial pace.
It overheats.
Exactly. The translation machine in the brain is the emulator. It is eating up all of your cognitive RAM. You are working incredibly hard, but the output is painfully slow and jerky. By the time you've gone through all 4 steps to build your English sentence, the person you are talking to has already moved on to the next topic.
The latency is simply too high. Human conversation operates at a specific frequency, a specific speed. If your lag time is too great, you fall out of sync with the rhythm we were discussing. The translation machine fundamentally destroys natural pacing.
But the guide doesn't just diagnose the problem, which I love. It offers a very specific practical solution. It's about short-circuiting that emulator. It's about forcing the brain to bypass the native language entirely and learn how to label the immediate physical environment directly in English.
Which is the foundation of building a completely new neural pathway.
The exercise recommended in the text is brilliantly simple. It challenges you to just sit in a room, look around, and describe your immediate physical reality using tiny observational thoughts. The exact example given is, I'm sitting on a chair, I have my phone in my hand, the room is quiet.
What is happening neurologically during that exercise is profound. You aren't just practicing vocabulary. You are essentially installing an entirely separate native English operating system in your brain.
Yeah.
You are getting rid of the emulator.
By tying the physical sensory experience directly to the English word.
Precisely. Right now, for a learner, their native language is the master operating system. Every single sensory input routes through it.
Yeah.
But when you sit quietly and associate the physical feeling of weight and fabric directly with the English word sitting on a chair, without letting your brain say the native word first, you are building a bridge that skips the translation step entirely. You are connecting the concept directly to the new language.
So the goal is that over time, you don't even need to boot up your native language OS when you want to speak English. The 2 languages live in separate, independent compartments in your mind.
And as the source notes, when you practice these small, direct observations consistently, your brain eventually stops translating. The process becomes automatic. You bypass the slow, heavy 4-step translation machinery and go straight from pure thought or sensory input directly to English output. The lag disappears.
And naturally, when that lag disappears and the emulator is turned off, your processing speed increases. The words come faster. But, and this is where our source material introduces a massive counterintuitive twist, the author strictly warns the listener against trying to speak quickly.
Which forces us to completely redefine our cultural understanding of the concept of fluency.
Yeah, we all have this ingrained image in our heads of what fluent looks like. We picture a fast-talking lawyer in a television drama, firing off witty retorts at lightning speed. We equate speed with mastery. But the text tackles this misconception head-on. It states unequivocally that fluency is not about speaking fast. Fluency is about speaking smoothly, clearly, and confidently.
This is a vital distinction and one that trips up so many advanced learners. We conflate velocity with skill.
Right.
But if you look at the physical and physiological advice provided in the guide, it explicitly tells the learner, speak slowly, open your mouth clearly, enunciate, do not rush your words.
I understand the theory, but let me argue the reality of the modern world for a moment.
Okay.
If I am in a fast-paced environment, let's go back to that corporate boardroom, or even just a noisy pub with a group of native speakers. If I speak slowly and carefully, aren't I just inviting people to interrupt me? Won't they get impatient and talk over me? If I want to hold my ground, shouldn't I try to match their lightning speed?
That is a very common defense mechanism, but it relies on a misunderstanding of how human attention works. Let's look at the dual benefits of speaking slowly. There are two audiences in every conversation. You, the speaker, and the person listening to you.
Okay.
For you, the speaker, slowing your physical rate of speech mechanically gives your brain the crucial milliseconds it needs to fetch the next word. It reduces the processing pressure. You aren't constantly outrunning your own headlights and tripping over your own thoughts.
You are giving that new, fragile English operating system time to load the next file.
Yes. And for the listener, speaking slowly and opening your mouth to articulate clearly vastly improves comprehension. Your listener doesn't have to strain to decode your meaning.
That makes sense.
And to address your point about being interrupted in a boardroom, people do not interrupt slow speakers if the rhythm is consistent and confident. People interrupt stumbling speakers.
Oh, that is a huge distinction. Let's dig into that.
When you try to mimic movie speed delivery, before your brain's neural pathways are fully myelinated and ready for it, you inevitably crash. You trip over syllables, use filler words, you hesitate.
The ums and ahs.
Exactly. That erratic, chaotic rhythm signals weakness to a group dynamic, and that is when you get interrupted. But if you speak slowly with a steady metronomic rhythm, it actually commands authority. It forces the room to slow down and listen to you. Smooth, slow speech is incredibly powerful.
And there is a positive feedback loop embedded in that clarity, isn't there? The text points out that when you speak clearly and at a manageable pace, your listener understands you effortlessly. They nod, they engage. And when you, the learner, physically see and feel that you are being understood, what happens to your internal state?
Your cortisol levels drop, and your confidence naturally grows. The interaction is logged in your brain as a success. This fuels your emotional capacity to continue the conversation. It proves to your nervous system that you are safe.
Since we are talking about how we sound, we have to address the elephant in the room regarding pronunciation. Our source material points out that countless learners torture themselves obsessively over their accent. They buy courses and spend hundreds of hours trying to erase their native accent entirely, hoping to sound like they were born in Ohio or London.
And the guidance on this is incredibly grounded. The goal of pronunciation practice is clarity, not perfection, and certainly not the erasure of your identity.
Right.
An accent is simply the echo of your first language. It is a sign of bilingualism, which is an intellectual achievement. The only time an accent is a problem is if it actively obscures the clarity of the vowels and consonants to the point where the cargo cannot cross the bridge. As long as the words are formed clearly enough to be understood easily, the accent is entirely irrelevant to your fluency.
But when we push ourselves to speak faster than we should, trying to hide that accent or sound native, we inevitably stumble. We mispronounce a word, or we use the wrong tense. And making that visible public mistake usually triggers the absolute worst enemy of any language learner. A topic our source tackles with profound honesty: fear.
Fear is the ultimate barrier. It is the gatekeeper. The text rightly identifies it as the biggest enemy of speaking. You can have the vocabulary, you can have the slow pacing, you can bypass the translation emulator, but if the fear response hijacks your amygdala, none of the mechanics matter.
It's that insidious voice in the back of your head constantly whispering, what if I use the wrong preposition? What if they think I'm stupid? What if they laugh at me?
To understand this, we have to look at the evolutionary psychology of the learner, specifically the role of the ego.
Okay, the ego.
The ego is terrified of social demotion. It is terrified of looking incompetent or foolish in front of the tribe because biologically, thousands of years ago, looking weak could mean being ostracized. So the ego protects itself by choosing silence. The fear of social judgment literally paralyzes the vocal cords to prevent you from taking a risk.
But the guide offers a profound reality check to counter this evolutionary paranoia. It reminds us that in the real modern world, the person you are talking to is not focusing on your mistakes. They are not pulling out a red pen to grade your grammar. They're just trying to understand your idea. They want to cross the bridge with you.
It is remarkably liberating insight when you finally internalize it. We project our own intense magnifying glass self-scrutiny onto the listener. We assume they are judging us as harshly as we judge ourselves. But most human beings are deeply empathetic.
Yeah.
Furthermore, the text points out that most people actually hold a deep, unspoken respect for someone who is navigating the vulnerability of speaking a second or third language. They know how hard it is.
The prescribed solution from the text is a fundamental shift in mindset. You have to actively choose courage over fear. The author writes this beautiful directive. Even if your voice shakes, speak anyway.
It frames language learning not just as an intellectual exercise, but as an ongoing act of bravery.
It really is. It takes guts. But let's be practical. What happens when bravery isn't enough? You step up, you choose courage, you start speaking, your voice is shaking, and then suddenly, right in the middle of your sentence, the exact noun you desperately need just vanishes from your brain into thin air. You hit a total blank.
The nightmare scenario.
This is the moment most people panic and apologize. But the text offers what I consider the ultimate secret weapon survival tactic for this exact scenario.
Yes, the circumlocution workaround.
Yeah.
This is where we separate the passive learners from the active communicators.
The text advises that when you run out of words, do not panic, do not freeze, do not retreat into silence. Instead, use the simple words you do have to describe the word you lost.
Which requires a high degree of cognitive flexibility. It demonstrates true communicative competence, which is much more valuable than having a massive vocabulary.
The example from the source is so elegant. Let's say you want to say the word calculator, but your brain has temporarily deleted it. You are in the middle of a sentence, and a terrifying blank space appears where calculator should be.
Right.
The freeze response tells you to stop, stare at the floor, and mumble, "I'm sorry, my English is bad, I forgot the word."
Which kills the rhythm completely.
Exactly. But the workaround, the circumlocution trick, is to just describe the object's function. Instead of calculator, you seamlessly say, a machine for counting numbers.
And the conversation continues flawlessly. The listener instantly visualizes a calculator, the cargo crosses the river, and the rhythm is maintained.
Let me bring back the driving analogy we touched on earlier to really solidify how important this is. Imagine you are driving your car to a very important destination. You're cruising down the highway, making great time, and suddenly you hit a massive roadblock. A tree has fallen across the road.
A total obstruction.
Yeah.
The missing vocabulary word.
Right. Now, the panic response, the equivalent of freezing and apologizing in a conversation, is to just give up. You put the car in park, you break down in tears, or you throw it in reverse, drive all the way back home and tell yourself, well, I guess I am just incapable of reaching my destination. You abandon the journey entirely.
A complete failure of the objective.
But the workaround, the machine for counting numbers trick, is simply taking a scenic detour. You see the roadblock, you stay calm, and you turn down a side street. Now, driving down 3 side streets to get around the fallen tree might take you a little bit longer. Saying a machine for counting numbers takes a few more syllables than just saying calculator.
Right.
But the crucial, undeniable fact is you still reach the exact same destination. The idea is successfully delivered.
That is a phenomenal way to visualize it. The scenic detour keeps the forward momentum alive. It prevents the conversational crash. And keeping that communication moving forward, no matter what obstacles arise, is the entire philosophy of this guide. But, as the text rightly points out, overcoming that deep-seated fear, bypassing the translation emulator, and learning to smoothly navigate those mental detours, none of this happens magically. It requires a very specific physiological kind of conditioning.
Which brings us to the final and perhaps most actionable segment of our deep dive. You can't just understand these concepts intellectually, you have to physically train your body and brain to execute them. The source provides a highly specific daily regimen to build this communicative muscle. We can call it the daily toolkit.
And the absolute foundational principle of this entire toolkit is consistency over intensity. The author draws a direct comparison. Learning to speak English smoothly is exactly like building a physical muscle in the gym.
Oh, I like that.
You cannot get strong by sitting on the couch for a month and then going to the gym for 10 brutal hours on a single Saturday.
You wouldn't get strong. You would just tear a muscle and end up in the hospital.
Precisely. The central nervous system needs rhythmic, repeated exposure to adapt. The text insists that practicing for just 10 minutes a day is exponentially more effective than sporadic, heavy 3-hour study sessions. Small, daily friction creates massive neurological changes over time. It is about cumulative exposure.
Let's unpack the specific exercises the text recommends for those 10 minutes. The first tool is what we can call the 5-minute daily life summarization. The instruction is to take 5 minutes at the end of your day and just narrate what you did out loud in English.
Just out loud.
Yeah, the example given in the text is beautifully, wonderfully simple. Today I woke up early, I had breakfast, then I went to work.
We need to look at why something so seemingly basic is actually incredibly powerful. When you do this, you are forcing your brain to take your actual lived physical reality and encode it directly into the English operating system.
Right, bypassing the emulator.
Exactly. You are practicing the act of organizing your thoughts chronologically and linguistically. But crucially, you are doing it without the pressure, the fear, and the cortisol spikes of a live audience. You are safely testing the software.
You are building the bridge in a safe environment. And then there is a mechanical technique the text highlights, which is widely considered one of the most effective language hacks in existence: shadowing.
Shadowing is a fascinating neurological and physical tool. The text defines it simply as listening to a sentence spoken by a native speaker and repeating it out loud immediately, almost overlapping them.
So if you are listening to a podcast and the host says, "I am learning English every day," you don't pause it to think, you immediately mimic them out loud. I am learning English every day.
Let's delve deeply into the physical mechanics of why shadowing works so well. When you speak your native language, the muscles in your jaw, your tongue, your lips, and your vocal cords have spent decades being optimized to produce a specific set of phonemes, specific sounds. English requires completely different muscle movements and a totally different breath rhythm.
It's physical.
It is very physical. English is a stress-timed language. It has a very specific musicality to it.
So it's not just mental, it is a literal physical workout for the face.
Yes. And when you shadow, when you try to perfectly copy the tone, the pitch, and the rhythm of the speaker, you are doing something magical. You are bypassing the cognitive grammar check entirely.
Oh, wow.
You aren't stopping to analyze why the sentence is constructed that way. You aren't running the emulator. You are simply training the physical muscles of your mouth to produce the sounds naturally. You are absorbing the syntax and the grammar implicitly through muscle memory rather than explicitly through rule memorization.
It's the difference between trying to learn how to sing a complex song by reading a book about sheet music versus just getting in your car, turning the radio up, and singing along at the top of your lungs until you hit the notes naturally.
Which, as the text notes, improves both your speaking fluidity and your listening comprehension simultaneously because you are physically internalizing the rhythm of the language.
The toolkit also emphasizes the power of simple storytelling, taking those basic sentences and stringing them together. The text suggests practicing a simple weekend recap. Last weekend, I stayed at home and watched a movie. It was very relaxing.
Notice again the emphasis on simple architecture. The practice isn't in using complex words. The practice is in the transition, moving from sentence A to sentence B to sentence C smoothly without the internal emulator freezing up. That is how you build the continuous forward momentum we defined as true fluency.
Now, there's a specific environmental detail from the source that I think is the linchpin to making all of this work. The author strongly, emphatically advises practicing these exercises, the shadowing, the storytelling, the narrating, by speaking completely alone or even speaking directly to yourself in a mirror.
This is a strategic move to neutralize the amygdala. It addresses the fear component directly. By removing the listener, you remove the threat of social judgment. When you speak to a mirror, there is zero social risk. Your cortisol levels are at baseline. But neurologically, the developmental benefits are still occurring. The text explicitly states, even if no one is listening, your brain is learning. Every single sentence you physically push through your vocal cords out loud is myelinating those neural pathways, making the signal travel faster next time.
Which leads perfectly into a profound piece of psychological extrapolation we can draw from the text. Beyond just practicing sentences, the source provides a very specific, targeted confidence exercise.
Oh, this part is brilliant.
It asks the reader to look in that mirror, make eye contact with themselves, and say this exact sentence out loud, I can speak English, and then to repeat it, I can speak English.
And the most crucial, telling part of that instruction is the caveat that follows it. Even if you don't fully believe it yet, say it anyway.
I want to spend some time on the power of that specific instruction, because a lot of people might hear that and think it sounds like cheap self-help. Why does physically saying it out loud matter if your internal monologue is screaming that you are faking it? Why does the biological act of speaking a lie change the truth?
Because your mindset is not just a passive observer of your reality. It is the active architect of your performance. There's a concept in linguistics called the affective filter.
The affective filter.
You can think of it as an emotional barrier, a wall that goes up when you feel anxious, stressed, or full of self-doubt. When that affective filter is high, it literally blocks your brain's language acquisition device from functioning. The vocabulary is trapped behind the wall.
So self-doubt isn't just a bad feeling, it is a literal neurological blockade.
Yes, but when you articulate a belief out loud, when you look in the mirror and declare, I can speak English, you are beginning to lower that affective filter. You are bridging the gap between self-doubt and self-fulfilling prophecy. You are forcing your own ears to hear your own voice claim competence.
That's powerful.
The brain is highly suggestible. When you tell your nervous system, repeatedly and out loud, that you are capable and safe, the affective filter drops. The wall comes down. And as the author states, when you believe in yourself, your actual mechanical performance improves.
It is the ultimate psychological hack. You don't wait for the belief to arrive so you can act. You behave your way into the belief.
Exactly. And the final piece of the daily toolkit the text mentions is about how you consume input. We all watch videos and listen to podcasts, but the text advises a shift in focus. Don't just listen to memorize new vocabulary words. Listen to observe how native speakers navigate conversations.
Like studying the rhythm.
Yes, notice the rhythm, notice the pauses. Notice how often they use simple sentences. Notice their facial expressions when they circumlocute around a word they forgot.
You are absorbing the music of the language, not just analyzing the lyrics.
That is a perfect encapsulation. You are tuning your ear to the frequency of natural communication.
Oh, bringing all these massive paradigm shifts together, the mindset reframing, the shadowing, the daily 5-minute summaries, the dismantling of the emulator, it all builds toward the final, deeply empowering message of our source material.
It culminates in a message of profound encouragement, designed to completely reset the learner's relationship with the English language.
Let's synthesize the core lessons we've unpacked today, from speak your way to English confidence. For you, listening right now, wherever you are in your language journey, first, fundamentally reject the perfection trap.
Absolutely.
Do not wait for confidence or flawlessness to start speaking. The bridge you build doesn't need to be an architectural marvel of shiny steel. It just needs to be a sturdy wooden plank that gets your idea across the river.
And second, embrace the immense power of simplicity. Strip the ego out of your vocabulary. Clarity is your greatest asset, and obscurity is not intelligence. I went to work is a perfect, highly effective, fluent sentence.
Third, bypass the internal translation emulator. Stop running Mac software on a Windows PC. Build your English operating system by labeling your immediate physical world directly in English, bypassing your native language entirely.
Fourth, build the physical muscle of your mouth and the neurological pathways of your brain through consistent, low-stakes daily practice. 5 or 10 minutes of shadowing or summarizing your day out loud is infinitely more effective than a weekend of cramming grammar rules.
Fifth, when the inevitable roadblocks appear, do not panic and do not reverse the car. Use clever workarounds like the calculator trick. Describe the word you lost. Take the scenic detour and keep the forward momentum of the conversation alive.
And finally, always choose courage over fear. The people you are talking to are not grading you. They just want to connect with you.
And if we connect all of this mechanical and psychological advice to the ultimate truth revealed in the text, it is simply this. You already possess the raw materials. You already understand more than you think you do.
The database is full.
The database is full. Now, it is no longer a matter of passive studying. It is a matter of active unlocking. And you unlock it not through massive, terrifying leaps, but through one simple, clear, courageous sentence at a time.
Exactly right.
Which brings me to a final thought I want to leave you with, something to really mull over as you go about the rest of your day. We spent a lot of time analyzing the power of the daily toolkit, and specifically the author's advice device to practice speaking entirely alone in front of a mirror. Think deeply about that image. We spend so much time agonizing over how we will sound to others. We worry about the boardroom. We worry about the barista in London. We worry about the native speakers who might judge our accents. But what if the most important English conversations you will ever have in your entire life aren't with any of those people?
Oh, well, that's interesting.
What if they aren't the high-stakes negotiations with corporate clients, or the terrifying, unpredictable interactions with strangers at a restaurant? What if the most critical, foundational conversations you will ever have are actually the quiet, incredibly awkward, yet profoundly brave conversations you have with yourself out loud in an empty room?
Wow.
If true fluency, the smooth, fearless connection between your thoughts and your voice, can be built in that private solitude simply by looking yourself in the eye in a mirror and daring to say, I can speak English, then the only real barrier between you and the confidence you so desperately want isn't geography. It isn't a lack of advanced vocabulary, and it isn't even the crippling weight of social anxiety.
No, it isn't.
It is simply a matter of being willing to stand there, drop the judgment, and keep yourself company in a new language. So step up to the mirror today, lower the filter, build the wooden bridge. You've got this. Thank you for joining us on this deep dive. We will catch you next time.